UFOs, cryptids, unsolved mysteries, megalithic structures, extraterrestrials, interdimensional portals, time skips, and more. Don't change that channel, because now you are leaving the mainstream and entering into the fringe.
Greetings, followers. It is I, Cardinal Sin, and welcome to Into the Fringe, number 55. This will be our third Abduction Roundtable, and today we have three guests. And the first is Terry Lovelace, who is a 6-year veteran of the United States Air Force, where he served as a medic and EMT from 1973 to 1979. He has a bachelor's degree in psychology with honors from Park University in Kansas City, Missouri, just up the street from me in Lawrence. He completed a law degree from Western Michigan and passed the Michigan State Bar examination. His legal career began in private practice until his appointment as an assistant attorney general for the U.S. Territory of American Samoa, and he also served as state's attorney for Vermont Board of Medical Practice until his 2012 retirement. Terry and a friend were abducted from Devil's Den State Park in northwest Arkansas in June of 1977 while remote camping. They were both on active duty at the time. What followed were 40-plus years of nightmares, phobia, and PTSD-like issues, which continue to this day. In 2012, a routine leg X-ray discovered two anomalous objects in his leg. The X-rays are on his website at terrylovelace.com. That event was his catalyst to write 2 books and speak publicly about his experiences. For fear of losing his job and the respect of his peers in the legal community, he waited until 2018 to self-publish Incident at Devil's Den, a #1 bestseller on Amazon. His second book, Devil's Den: The Reckoning, was published the week of Christmas 2020. It was #1 in new releases immediately and hit #1 bestseller status on February 10th. He spoken at the UFO Congress in 2018, Contact in the Desert in 2019 and 2021, the Roswell UFO Festival 2019, UFO Con in Dallas in 2020, Alien Con in San Francisco in 2020, the Ascension Conference in Sedona in 2021, and the Ozark Digital Conference in 2021. Since March 2018, he's been a radio/podcast guest 150-plus times. Yvonne Smith, CHT, became concerned with the victims of post-traumatic stress disorder in the late 1980s and in 1990. After 2 years of studies and 1,000 hours of internship, she received her hypnotherapist certification from the California Hypnosis Motivation Institute, the only such accredited institution in the United States. In 1990, when she opened her office, she immediately began to work with PTSD victims, assisting them and encouraging them to work through and cope with their PTSD experiences. Many of her subjects were and are referred to by physicians and psychologists who believe Yvonne's expertise can benefit their patients. Observing that many of her subjects were describing a pattern of alien abduction and other close encounter experiences, in 1991, Yvonne founded CERO, the Close Encounter Research Organization, later renamed Close Encounter Resource Organization, which provides personal attention and maintains active monthly support group meetings by which Yvonne is able to remain close and supportive. At CERO meetings, PTSD subjects may share their thoughts and feelings about their unusual experiences and any continuing difficulties. Her books include Coronado, The President, the Secret Service, and Alien Abductions, and Chosen, From the Alien Hybrid Program to the Fate of the Planet. Debbie Jordan-Kauble was the central figure in Budd Hopkins' New York Times bestseller, Intruders, The Incredible Visitations at Copley Woods, and the 1992 CBS miniseries of the same name, starring Richard Crenna and Mare Winningham. To protect her family, she went by the pseudonym of Kathy Davis. After a lifetime of continued experiences, she wrote her own book, Extraordinary Contact: Life Beyond Intruders, to share her journey with others who have been affected by the phenomenon. She is a wife, mother to 4, and grandmother to 8. She lives in Kokomo, Indiana, is a retired automotive industry worker, a licensed cosmetologist, a member of Mensa, the Authors Guild, and the American Red Cross. Welcome all to Into the Fringe.
Hello.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being with us. We really appreciate it. And I'd like to dive right in. So let's do. And I'm going to start with Terry, but Deb, Yvonne, please jump in whenever you like. Terry, let's start with you. Could you kind of take us by the hand and walk us through your early experiences?
Sure. I had experiences as a child. As I explained in Devil's Den, Incident at Devil's Den, when I was between the ages of 4 and about 8, I would have, and I know this sounds a little bizarre, little monkey-like things that look like they look like circus monkeys.
The monkey men.
The monkey men, as I refer to them in my book. Yeah, would come into my room. There were always 4 of them. They'd always come in the middle of the night, and sometimes in the beginning, I thought they were kind of comical and benign, but then I became fearful of them. So they would, they would ask me, "Would you come with us?" And I'm sure sometimes I said yes, and sometimes I would scream bloody murder for my parents. But I know I went with them lots of times. And of course, I was a kid. Nobody would believe me.
And when you went with them, did they ask you and you could say no?
Yeah, I felt like in the beginning when I was real young that they asked my permission. And if I would scream, they would just disappear in a twirl of shadows. But later on, I really didn't have a say. I didn't have the ability to say no. And that's one of the nightmares that's haunted me for so many years is the one closest to my bed would always hold out a paw to me and speak telepathically to me and ask me if I'd like to go. And in my nightmares, I'm back in bed. I'm 5 years old or so, and the monkey's there and it's holding out a paw, but in the nightmare, it's not a paw at all. It's these big 4 long gray fingers. And I just flip out, that's.
May I interject here?
Sure.
Please.
When Terry spoke to me about his childhood memory, I was able to interview his sister about his reactions and did she remember him, screaming out? And it was very interesting to listen to her point of view. She remembers that he would always be very, very fearful, and he would talk about these monkeys. And she said that the house that they lived in at the time, she said she hated that house. She hated living there. I suppose because of all the activity. So I was very, very grateful that she, was trusting me enough to open up to me about what was happening back then.
Yes, thank you.
So, Terry, getting back to you, what happened after your initial UFO sighting, and maybe we should back up if you'd like to tell us about that.
Yeah, my initial UFO
flying saucer.
Yeah, the flying saucer. Yeah, I was in my backyard, and it was 1963. I think I was 8 years old, and I was playing with a bow and arrow in my backyard in an urban area. I don't know. One of my relatives gave me an adult bow and arrow target set, kind of a lethal weapon for an 8-year-old to be playing with. And I was shooting these arrows into this bale of hay, and I was looking down, loading an arrow into the notch of the bowstring, and I saw a perfectly round shadow. It was in May. It was a beautiful, bright, sunny day. I saw a perfectly round shadow move across the ground in front of me, and I instinctively looked up. And there was this silver or, polished metal of some kind disc about 50 feet above me, maybe 30 feet in diameter. I mean, I was 8 years old. I'm not good with dimensions, but I think that's going to be pretty close. Mm-hmm. And I had no fear whatsoever. As a matter of fact, I was thrilled. I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. I mean, it was cool in the way that a new sports car is cool on a showroom floor. If that makes sense.
The sports model, as it were.
Yeah. So I watched it for a few seconds, and I had the stupid idea if I laid down on the ground, I could get a better view of it. I don't know what possessed me to do that, but that's what I did.
So you were literally right underneath it.
Yes, looking up at it, and it wobbled a little bit in the breeze. And it took off like zoom and was gone. And I screamed for my mother, and I was excited. I'm like, Ma, did you see it? It was so cool. Did you see it? And of course, nobody else saw it. You
weren't scared?
Not in the least, no.
And so what happened after that?
Well, I always wondered if they were going to come back. And every time I went in the backyard, I'd look at the hole in the sky. I mean, not a literal hole, but the spot where it vanished. And, the crazy thing was, I should mention, it was a noisy day in the neighborhood. There were people cutting grass, women hanging up laundry. There were, kids playing ball. There were cars. There were dogs, all kinds of noise. And when I looked up, the second I laid eyes on this thing, all the sounds became muffled. It sounded like, like I had my hands pressed against my ears or something. Mm-hmm. And that was just an odd sensation. I don't know. I've had other people tell me that they've experienced that too, but that was real for me. And I don't know how there could be so many people around the neighborhood and nobody else saw it. That blows my mind.
Yeah.
And what can you tell us about the second saucer that you saw?
That happened in 1964. I think it happened the next year. Mm-hmm. I was 9. We lived on a 2-story house. I was on the second floor. Bitterly cold January night, and but it was after Christmas. There were no Christmas lights out. And I was sound asleep in my bed, and I woke up to these lights outside my window, and I threw my legs over the bed, and I hopped out of bed. I went and I pulled back there were heavy drapes, a drafty old house. There were heavy drapes and a Venetian blinds in back of those. So I pulled back the curtains, drapery, and I opened the blind to get a view because I thought I'd see a fire truck or something. There were these flashing lights. And it was another saucer. Could have been the same saucer. I don't know. And it was right outside my window. And I mean, had I been able to open up that window, I think I could have stepped outside and stepped right onto it. And it was just another cool experience. And what I did was I held the Venetian blind up and I tucked the blinds into that so I could have a hands-free view of this thing. And I just watched it. And then I became suddenly disinterested, and I just turned and went back to bed. And the next morning, I didn't remember it at first until I turned my head and I saw the curtain tucked into the Venetian blind. And then it came flooding back to me. And, I was like, oh, yeah. And I didn't tell my family. I didn't tell a soul.
I know exactly what you mean. One of my experiences was that I was in my bedroom. I was going to sleep, and I heard a beeping noise like a trash truck backing up about 6 inches inside my wall. Beep, beep, beep. And having been familiar with the literature, I knew exactly what that meant. And so I became terrified, rolled over, and went right to sleep.
I can relate to that because I remember hearing a beeping sound. It seemed like it was coming near the window in my bedroom when I lived with my parents. It was during that time, near June 3083, and everything was going crazy. And as soon as I heard it, like you, I knew what it meant. And then I just went to sleep. And then I was awakened by hearing my name in my head, but it was like a chorus of voices that were all saying it at the same time. You know, my name, Debra, not even Debbie, but Debra. Mm-hmm. And then Terry, I wanted to say, I feel you, because Mom and I had a massive sighting over Indianapolis, Indiana in 1984 that we reported to J. Allen Hynek at the CUFOS, the Center for UFO Studies. And it was huge and massive. And we assumed that it was going to be reported all over the news and all over the radio and everything, because Indianapolis is like the 11th biggest city in the country. There are millions of people there. And we lived about 20 minutes from downtown Indy. So we thought, and near a major 465 that loops around the whole city was like a mile behind us. So we thought, surely to God, this thing was huge. Like it was a couple baseball or football fields big, and we talked to Dr. Hynek, and we drew pictures for him. And the last conversation my mom had with him, she said he told her that in all the years that he'd been studying it, he was beginning to think, based on things he'd seen, that not everyone could see these things or was meant to.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. And they, that I believe they choose who they want to see them, because even married couples will be together, and then there's something hovering above, and one will see it, and the other one, like, what are you talking about? Or the other one gets distracted, is not even looking up. That's happened to several of our members, our serial members, and it's it's amazing. When I hear, when Terry said that about the craft, like, how could nobody see it? Mm-hmm. And Deb right now with over a huge city, I mean, it's amazing. And it's hard for people to believe that, how could you be the only one to see it? But it happens all the time.
Sure. And just a little housekeeping here. I'd like to welcome the folks in the chat. Skogli Jotun is here. Anti-derivative Jill is here, as is Darius Munchausen. Eli McInnes, hail. Herc 130 is here. Lawrence Martin, good to see you. Canadian Spider-Man is here. Good to see you. As is Gap Stargate. And Canadian Spider-Man says hello to Terry, Yvonne, and Debra.
Hi.
Hi.
So we'll be checking in with our chat as we go. And I wanted to go ahead and ask you, Yvonne, regressive hypnotherapy is contentious these days. Many people say that it plants false memories when experiencers have some recall and want to know more. How do you defend it against the naysayers?
Oh, I've been hearing that same record play I've been doing this for 31 years now. And all I can say is that I've worked with hundreds of cases, and I go according to the information that comes forward, how my client feels while that is, while that's happening, because they are reliving the experience. My first goal is to get them to be relieved of the PTSD symptoms initially, because that's why they come to me. This experience has changed their lives. They're not able to work many times. They can't concentrate on their work. It's interfering with their relationships. They're very isolated because they don't really know who to talk to about it. And as the hidden memories, and that's what they're haunted about. They want to know, did this really happen? Did I dream it? Am I just crazy? I hear this all the time. As the buried memories come forward, that's when the relief starts, knowing that, okay, this happened to me. It's very strange and it's hard to explain, but at least I know why I've been behaving like this all my life, or why I saw these things when, these strange things when I was little and growing up. It's a process that they go through. And unfortunately, hypnotherapy sessions, we can't get it all done in 1 or 2 sessions. I've worked with some people for the last 30 years because this is an ongoing experience. It starts from childhood, follows the person throughout their lives. It is a family affair. It's intergenerational. Now, I was in a meeting earlier today, and I was explaining to these producers that the experience may lay dormant for a while. You may not have anything happen for a year, 2, 3 years, sometimes more. But then eventually, people will say, oh, I think they're done with me. I can relax. And it seems like as soon as they think that, or as soon as they say that, something happens. I call it high strangeness. Something else happens when they realize, oh no, I'm still having these experiences. And I just tell people, once you are chosen, for this experience in your families, you are in their program, and they will always have something for you to do, even if you can't, produce the ova anymore or sperm anymore. You can't carry children. I'm talking about the hybridization program. They will still have something for you to do because you are part of your program for the rest of your life.
And I also wanted to mention that everyone here on our panel are authors. I'm going to go ahead and make myself big here so that I can show these books. And this is Terry's first book, Incident at Devil's Den. And this is his second book, Devil's Den, The Reckoning. If I can figure that out. There we go. And this is one of Yvonne's books, Coronado, that we mentioned. And another of her books, Chosen. And this is From the Alien Hybrid Program to the Fate of the Planet. And I'll be asking you some questions about that in a bit, Yvonne. And of course, we have Extraordinary Contact, Life Beyond Intruders by Debra Jordan-Kauble. And I know that we are going to be giving away some books at the end of the show. My understanding is, Terry, we're going to give away this book. Is that right?
That's right.
And
yes.
That'll be autographed, correct?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. That's very generous. Yvonne, which of your books are we going to give away?
Well, if you'd like to give away both of them, that's fine. But if you only want to take one of them, go ahead. And I think Chosen would probably be a good one because it talks about the different cases. But I wanted to mention to your audience that Coronado is about a mass abduction that occurred in 1994 on Coronado Island in San Diego. We were having a UFO conference there, and it took me a long time to put it together because there were so many people involved, but that's what Coronado's about.
There was a mass abduction at a UFO conference?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And at the same time, President Clinton, who was president at the time, was due to be on the island at the same time we were there. So when we arrived, we had Secret Service all over the place. And some of my SERO members panicked. They said, "Oh my God, they know we're here. They're going to take us."
I've never heard of that before.
Oh no! I mean, it was the strangest weekend. I was the MC for the conference because it was, I'm in Southern California, so they asked me to be the MC, and so there was about a dozen SERO members that they all caravan down there, and they wanted to get together. They wanted to meet other experiencers. Afterwards, as I was writing the book, doing the research, one of my friends who's a lawyer, he said, it's really strange that they still allowed the conference to go on while the president was going to be there. And I thought, that's really true, because I remember when President Obama was our president and he was going to vacation on an island in Hawaii. I guess that's where he grew up. There was a wedding taking place where he was going to be, and they had them move the wedding to another venue. So it was like, okay, so obviously they knew we were going to be there because they case out, from what I understand, they case out these places months in advance, and they want to make sure everything's safe. And so that was really strange. And that was during the time I was writing the book, and I think I did put that in there.
That's very interesting. So, Terry, let's go ahead and go back to you. Often, as Yvonne said, the abduction phenomenon runs in families. Has anyone else in your family had experiences?
I have two older sisters, and I suspect they both had some kind of experiences. But in typical fashion, they were really, really reluctant to talk about it. My sister accepted a copy of my book, but said she couldn't read it. The only other, my wife, I've been married to her for 47 years or something. And
Mazel tov.
Yay! In 1987, she had her one and only experience, and she woke in the middle of the night, and I wasn't in the bed. But there was a figure at the foot of our bed. There was a window, kind of backlit on the second story, backlit by a street light. And in silhouette, there was this dark form that she perceived as female, hooded, about 4 foot tall, and she heard in her head, "Go back to sleep, everything's okay." And that's what she did.
Mm-hmm. Amazing.
Very interesting. Why don't you take us by the hand, walk us through the incident at Devil's Den, and what sort of how you lay it out in the book, briefly, if you can. I know that's kind of asking you to summarize an entire book is a tough cut, but I bet you can do it.
I can do that, sure. My friend and coworker, Tobias, and I worked the night shift in the emergency room at Whiteman Air Force Base. And one night about 4 a.m., he came up to me and said, "Hey, man, I got an idea. Let's go camping." Okay, and we were both city kids. Neither one of us had ever been camping before. I wasn't a Boy Scout. And we ended up making this trip. We drove 6 hours to get to Devil's Den State Park in northwest Arkansas. And Whiteman Air Force Base is in a remote location. There's a dozen beautiful parks, just right next door. Mm-hmm. And we drove down to this park because my friend Toby heard from some guy that fished that it was a cool place. And it had this plateau, this elevated plateau that was supposed to be just the coolest thing. And his deal was he liked to watch the night sky. So we didn't stay at the campground. We dodged the ranger station and we trespassed back behind a chain across the road with a sternly worded, keep out, no hunting, no fishing, no camping, no entry, and drove in and found this plateau and drove to the top of it. And we were just over the moon. It was just the coolest place. And we set up camp. We did all the fun stuff you do when you camp because it was all new to us. And we are later in the evening. We've eaten dinner, and we're on these air mattresses with this campfire between us. And I like to tell this because it's so cliche. People are like, "Oh yeah," but I swear to God that this is true, and it's happened to others. And that is that all the sounds in the forest, the crickets, the tree frogs, everything went dead silent. And it was, we could hear the fire crackle, and that was it.
This is known as the Oz effect, of course.
Yeah.
The Oz effect. So it was spooky. I thought it was very spooky. And it didn't faze my friend at all. He's like, don't worry about the bugs. They'll come back, So he asked me, Terry, were those lights there before? And he's looking at something on the western sky. And I looked, and he was looking at 3 little stars just above the horizon. And they were too far above the horizon to have been like from a parking lot or, train lights or something. And while we're watching them, they rotated. They turned like they were on an axis. And as soon as they stopped turning, it started to go up into the air. And the second that happened, I felt this wave of calm is the best way I can describe it. I mean, I felt lightly sedated. I felt kind of like a mild disinterest, too, in a way that I was more like an observer than a participant in what was going on. And this thing came in at, I'm guessing, 3,000 feet over our heads and parked right over the top of this plateau. And we were just laying there. There's no conversation. We're just watching it. And then that feeling of sedation shifted abruptly to sleepy. And there's a distinction between the two. I was sleepy. I just wanted to go to sleep. And with this thing 3,000 feet over our heads, we both got up and we went to the tent and went to sleep. And they took us sometime in the night and woke up the next morning with these crazy lights coming through the canvas of the tent. And this thing had descended from 3,000 feet down to about 30 feet over the what I call the meadow.
Wow.
And fortunately, it wasn't right directly over our heads. We were offset to the side. And we saw, in the flashing lights, we saw what we first thought to be children. Maybe a dozen, 15 of these kids. And they weren't kids. They weren't human beings. And so in a nutshell, that's what happened to us. I didn't really have memories of what happened inside the ship, although I did have a few just flashes of mental imagery. But that's about it.
Are all of your memories conscious and you haven't undergone regressive hypnotherapy?
Well, I did undergo regressive hypnotherapy, courtesy of the United States Air Force and their Office of Special Investigations. And they had me... they were. I think they were scared to death that I had a reputation of being a photographer, and I think that they thought that I had a 36 exposure roll of film of this thing, and I didn't. God, I wish I had.
Terry, didn't you leave your camera on the kitchen counter?
Sure did. Left my camera at home, and it's something a photographer would never do. But my friend Toby had a camera in his backpack that was a foot away from him. And the thought to take a picture of this thing never crossed our minds.
And he was an amateur astronomer, is that right?
That's right. That was his big passion.
And that's why you guys were out there.
Well, yeah, I wanted to photograph wildlife and he wanted to watch the night sky. So that seemed like a good...
what did he see when you guys were looking up?
when we were watching the night sky, I mean, there were a trillion stars out that night, the night of our camping trip. But until he saw the 3 stars on the horizon, there really wasn't anything remarkable.
And what happened with the 3 stars on the horizon?
They rotated like they were on an axis. They went straight up in the air. They went up kind of this orientation where we could see 3 stars. And then it reached what I refer to as a ceiling. And then it kind of did this and reoriented itself parallel with the ground. And then started like a glide plane toward us. And we knew it was coming in our direction because we could see 3 lights in a row. So it was, the apex of the triangle was pointed at us.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we had no fear. We had no anxiety. We were just watching it.
Was it one of these?
Very, very much like one of those. Yes. The thing that I saw, and there's a picture, I think I sent you a hand drawing of it that I did contemporaneous with the event. I think I drew it first on some ruled notebook paper, and then I transferred the image over to some better paper. But that was originally done in August 1977. And it was big. I mean, it was the size of a Walmart. That's it.
That's
and
it there.
The lights were on the points of the triangle.
So when you 2 woke up in the morning, did you remember what had happened to you when you were taken?
No, not at first. I didn't. I woke up and I was confused, and I didn't have my wits about me. Mm-hmm. And I looked down and my boots were unlaced, and I knew that I didn't go to bed with them like that, and that annoyed me. It didn't scare me, but it annoyed me. Mm-hmm. And I took off my boots and my socks were on sideways, and I knew I didn't do that. And it never occurred to me that we'd been undressed and redressed by someone else. But when I saw these little guys walking around the meadow, and I asked Toby, man, what are these kids doing out here in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere? He said, Terry, man, look, those ain't little kids. Look at them. They're not human beings. And the second he said that, I had a flash of an image in my mind of being inside this thing. But just a flash. Like I said, I've never had a clear linear memory of everything that happened to us. I just have bits and pieces.
Now, in your book, Incident at Devil's Den, you mention quite often that you had a great deal of anxiety and nightmares for many, many years. Can you kind of walk us through how you dealt with that and
Sure.
When things evened out so that you weren't, suffering PSTD anymore, or if you are still.
Yeah, I mean, I still have, for instance, I can't cut across an open field. I'll walk 1.5 miles around, but I won't, if I'm by myself especially, I won't cut across an open field because it gives me anxiety. I don't know why, but it does. And undressed storefront mannequins wig me out for some reason. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to look at them. So I had a lot of trouble at first. It really turned my world upside down. And the Air Force knew that we'd seen something. I think they knew exactly what we saw. I don't know how they knew, but they knew. And I had a lot of difficulty sleeping, and my friend Toby had the same issues. He turned to alcohol to sleep. It wasn't like he was a drinker, but when the sun went down, he was just pounding vodka to get to sleep.
Yeah. unfortunately, that happens sometimes to abductees. You mention in the book quite a bit about nightmares and the praying mantis being. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, but one of the memories that I have was being taken into a white domed room, and there was a pedestal style white. It looked like porcelain, but it was warm to the touch. And I thought, oh boy, they warmed it up for me. How nice! But I think there'd been a parade of people probably on it before me. There's the reason it was warm. But you know, it was weird. When I walked into that room, it had a real clinical vibe to it. It didn't feel like it was going to be a torture session. I mean, the being I saw was frightening. He did something to hurt my lower back. But I never felt, and it was a recurring nightmare. I haven't had one in a while. But you know, I picture this thing in a white lab coat. I don't think there's any way that this thing wore a white lab coat, but that's the way I see it in my dream.
Sure. And I know that there were a lot of nightmares, and I assume that they've become fewer as time has gone on. Are you still having contact experiences?
The latest one that I had was April 16th of 2019. And I was, I sleep with a t-shirt with a pocket in it and with an iPhone 6 is what I had at the time. And I would listen to, meditative apps or music or binaural beats or something so that I wouldn't hear the ambient noises in the household to freak me out. You know, I sleep better when I got that distraction. And I woke up the following morning, and if you look in the Red Book at page 197, you'll see a picture of my iPhone health app. And it shows that between 5:23 and 5:24 a.m. on April 16, 2019, that I climbed 6 flights of stairs between 5:23 and 5:24.
And of course, there weren't 6 flights of stairs there.
You know, there was 1 6-inch threshold step in my front porch front door, and that's it. There were no stairs in my house. And I was sound asleep next to my wife until 5:55 a.m.
I'll go ahead and show that. That's the app to which you refer?
It is. 6 floors there at the bottom gray bar. And then the y-axis, I can never keep x and y-axis straight.
Straight, yeah.
The next page shows that single bar going straight up six flights of stairs, marked off in 10-foot increments.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because normally if I climb a flight of stairs, I get a stair step out reading on the graph because, you know, time passes from left to right, and I can't climb 6 flights of stairs in a minute.
I don't think anybody can.
No. I'm still amazed, Terry. I look at that picture. I'm still amazed.
So I'm going to go ahead and show your x-ray. And if you could be so kind as to tell us about it. This is the first one here. What are we looking at?
That's from October of 2012. I retired from the state of Vermont in January of 2012. Moved to Dallas to live with our kids. And in October that year, I couldn't bear weight on that knee. So I get all my medical care from the VA. My wife took me to the hospital, and they x-rayed my leg, even though I really didn't suffer an injury. And they found that. And then above my knee, there's a square structure about the size of a fingernail with 2 wires attached to it. And the radiologist showed me these films, and I was stunned. I was stunned because after really not thinking about this, or trying not to think about it or talk about it or dwell on it for years, this was just confirmation for me that these things put their hands on me. And that just was hard for me to process.
And in this X-ray, this is a blow up of one of your X-rays, and it looks like a chip with some wires.
It does. It looks like an RFD chip.
What is with that?
Well, you know, it's kind of a mystery. I went to law school with a guy who is who just retired from Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. And I sent him this because they have the world's largest database of electronic devices. I mean, transistors, resistors. I mean, anything that is an electrical component, they have it in their database. Because post Lockerbie, Scotland, that's how they solved that bombing case in Lockerbie. So whatever's in my leg is not in their database.
And you also had, was it 5 discs in your leg?
Those, well, I refer to them as disc because the floral pattern, those little florets that make up the in my calf muscle. When you look at those, they're just as thin as a piece of paper. Yeah, but those I refer to those as discs because they're so thin. They're paper thin. Mm-hmm. That's why on the anterior posterior film, when you look at it, you just see a line. There, yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, Yvonne, this kind of thing is pretty common with experiencers, abductees, however you'd like to put it. Can you tell us about the alien implants and what you think they are for, what they might be used for? Because it almost seems like everyone that has had experiences of this type have implants.
I mean, it could possibly be everyone, and
may not know it.
Right. And I was talking about this earlier today in my meeting, but sometimes you feel the object right under the skin. Sometimes it feels like a little BB or a round disc, just as Terry was talking about, a round disc. And, you know, back in the day, you know, I studied with Budd Hopkins. And he was my mentor. I was very fortunate.
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace, yes. And
what a wonderful man.
We all miss him, right, Deb?
Oh, yeah.
We all miss him.
Every day.
But we, you know, back then, and I was the rookie of the group because I worked with Dr. David Jacobs and Dr. John Mack, and, you know, we would lecture at different conferences, you know, and there's still speculation because we don't know. I mean, first we're thinking, okay, they're implanting these devices as a tracking device, as we do with our wildlife. You know, we still do that. And so, okay, that makes sense. And then later on, as I was working with, you know, lots of cases, and we had several sessions of remembering when the object was implanted. When I worked with Dr. Roger Lear, who began removing these objects from people, he came up with a theory that it could be having to do something with our DNA, you know, tracking our DNA. Of course, we're still not sure. One of my big cases, and it's in Chosen, is about the abduction of 2 brothers. Jesse Long felt that he had his implant since he was a child, 5 years old. And he said he never remembered ever having childhood illnesses like we all, most of us did. Measles, mumps, chickenpox. He never had any of that. He wanted it. He wanted to have it removed because it was bothering him. It was right under the skin, and in fact, he has pictures as a child. He would keep his socks rolled down because if the socks hit it and covered it, it would rub and be it would be very painful. The same with being in bed. He said the sheets. He couldn't stand the sheets being over it. Can you imagine living with that for 30 some odd years? And once, he had it removed, well, he also felt, and I've heard this from other people, of almost a depression, almost like something was taken from his body that had been a part of him for so many years. It was sent to a lab, and this was back in the early 90s, to be analyzed. But what happened, and I have a couple of cases of this, at this point, I don't recommend anybody having them removed unless, like I said, if it bothers the person, if it's causing pain or discomfort. Because when these objects are removed, and this would happen to Jesse, and I have another case, they abducted him again. They were looking for the object. It wasn't there. They became very irritated. They implanted him again, and they'll do it in an area where we can't get near it, like, say, for instance, close to the brain. Mm-hmm. He said he had a very rough abduction. We did a session on this. The next morning, he had, after that abduction, he was very sick. I mean, he was, not to be gross or anything, but he could not leave the bathroom. He was that sick. And he said, he'd never experienced something like that before, and he'd been abducted since he was a child. It was the same with the other person, and she had a object removed just about in the same place Jesse had on the left shin, the front of the left shin. And after she had it removed, and it was Dr. Roger Lear's colleague, because Dr. Roger Lear was a podiatrist, so he could only do the feet. But she also was abducted again, had a very rough abduction. They were not pleased. They implanted her again. So, I don't recommend somebody just having it removed. I mean, I could understand they want it analyzed, and it's interesting to have it analyzed, but it's a lot to think about. I mean, I'm still searching for a surgeon who would be willing to do the surgeries. We don't have to use his name, but we do need a board certified, doctor to be able to do these things. And then, of course, as everybody knows, a lot of this research, it's out of pocket. So unless we have a benefactor willing to give us the money for, if we have to be in the hospital, or if we have to rent what's called a C-arm, which would come over the arm or the leg. It has a camera, and so there's a doctor removing the object, you could actually see it on the screen. That was something like $2,500 for the day. Mm-hmm. So we run into this all the time, and it's so difficult. But these objects are being implanted. We still don't know exactly why. It could be, taking care of keeping our immune system healthy, because they do need us. They do need us. They need our DNA. They need parts of us to be able to continue their hybridization program. So they want us working well, and healthy.
Sure. And Terry, I wanted to ask you, when you went to the doctor, can you walk us through the give and take? What happened with the doctor who was looking for a scar?
Oh, yeah. In October 2012, when I went in for the pain in my knee, the technician took the x-rays, and actually she ended up taking about 26 x-rays. I was only able to get my hands on 3. And she asked me, did you have an accident? Did you run into a radio or something to look out for this thing in your leg? And I said, no, I never hurt that leg other than a skinned knee as a kid. And the radiologist actually came down, which is very unusual, I understand. The radiologist came down, looked at my x-ray, and came over, and I think he was annoyed that he was asked to come down, and poked me in the knee and said, "You'll have a scar right here." And I said, "No, I don't have a scar there, doctor." And he says, "Well, you have to, because you can't violate the integrity of the skin and place something this deep into fascia and tissue and there not be a scar." And we kind of got into this back and forth, and he looked at my leg, and of course there is no scar. And he was visibly shaken up by that. And I asked him, "Well, doctor, let me ask you, how often is it that you find a foreign object like this in the body and there not be a corresponding scar?" And he said, "Never." He said, "I've been a radiologist 23 years. I can't account for how these things got into your leg."
And what did the doctor do to try and find the scar?
Oh, he looked at it. He turned, x-ray rooms are dark, so he turned the overhead lights on. And he had it's a teaching hospital, of course, and he had a student with him, and he asked her to there was a handheld black light. I didn't know that scar tissue will fluoresce under a black light. And he looked at my knee. He examined my knee for a long time, and there, with the black light, and there is nothing. There is no scar.
And what was his response to that?
He was visibly shaken. He was.
Interesting. Why do you think that there are these creatures, these entities visiting Earth?
I can only offer conjecture. I don't know.
Please.
But I think it has something to do with the hybridization program, something to do with our DNA. I'm told maybe perhaps something to do with the human soul. Daryl Sims, who's down in Houston, I'm in Dallas. Daryl told me about a woman who was abducted, and they showed her a hologram of her body and asked her to point to where the human soul resides.
Huh.
It's me.
Interesting.
Yvonne, is that common?
I don't remember having a case where they showed a hologram to the person and asking them to point out the soul. All the other, there's so many similarities that run through all of these cases, but that one I have not had. But now that I heard Terry talking about it, now I'm going to put it in the back of my head, and just in case I start hearing something like that, because that's how this research goes. You hear something, you think, I had a couple of cases in the beginning thinking, oh my God, this is just crazy.
Mm-hmm.
This can't be. And then when I would talk to Budd and, John and Don Mack and David Jacobs, say, oh yeah, we have lots of cases, which made me feel better because I felt like, okay, I'm on the right track here, but and just what Terry was talking about, how, he had a hard time in the beginning sleeping. He's not able to still walk through a large open field. The naked mannequins bother him. These are the things that I hear on a daily basis from people who have had this experience, who are having partial memories, and who are suffering from PTSD. So what Terry was saying is just a classic case of this is what people go through. And I'm not talking about specifically about the mannequins or specifically about the open field, but it's just they have a phobia, a fear, phobia of certain things, of a certain room in the house, of a certain road or a bridge that they don't want to even travel near. And these are the things that, with regression, we try to bring up and see what they get to the cause of it. So you get to the cause of the problem, then the PTSD symptoms begin to dissipate. All that fear begins to dissipate. So for those who don't know how, hypnosis and hypnotherapy works, I mean, to just dismiss it out of hand, they have no idea how much this helps people. And I've been doing it for over 30 years. And I know Deb can talk to this too, because she worked very closely with Budd.
Yeah.
Deb, can you speak to that?
Well, yeah, I was, this was back in 83 and 84 and 85 when most of the investigating was done for my case. But when I first went to New York for the first time, the very first place that Budd took me, before we even went to the studio apartment, was Dr. Klamar's office. She was a psychiatrist that he was working with and that he had been training on hypnotherapy with. And she actually hypnotized me. I was very leery of hypnosis because I watched, the Ed Sullivan Show when I was a kid, just TV shows where people would bark like dogs and stuff on while they were under hypnosis. And I'm like, I don't want anybody messing with my brain and making me do stuff like that. And Dr. Klamar was very kind and very patient, and she's like, that's not what hypnosis is about, and that's not the kind of hypnosis that we use. She says,
not the Svengali kind of thing.
She said, I'm going, and she did put me under a light hypnosis, trance or whatever while I was in their office, just so that I could feel how it feels, and I quickly learned that it's just an extremely heightened state of relaxation, mostly, and I'm always in control, and no one is going to make you do something that is against you. Yeah, you're not going to be made to do something against your morals or anything like that.
Right.
And I was only hypnotized probably, I was trying to think about it while you guys were talking about it, maybe 5 or 6 times the whole of my life, with once with Dr. Klamar and then Budd. Because I lived 1,500 miles away from him. Sure. And I lived in Indiana. He was in New York. We didn't have the internet. We didn't even have cell phones. A phone call was long distance, And so expensive. There wasn't a lot of opportunity for it. And I'm going to say probably 80 or 90% of my memories were all spontaneous without hypnosis. Mm-hmm. Hypnosis, what it did for me was I consciously remembered seeing the car, and I knew there was a license plate on the car, but in hypnosis, eventually I was able to remember most of the numbers on the license plate. It just kind of clarified, it relaxed me and helped to calm some of my fear so I could focus more on what my eyes had actually taken in at that moment. So it was very helpful for me. Now I can understand how, if it's done by someone who's not competent, that it might be a problem. It might create problems in some people. And that's certainly something to keep in mind. But, I was fortunate that I was handled by a competent person. And Yvonne, I would let Yvonne hypnotize me. I feel she's competent, I think you can't just take anybody off of the street and go do it. I think you need to, be mindful of who you're working with, but I think it can be helpful. It was definitely helpful for me. And it was funny because there were some times that I didn't actually remember a lot consciously under hypnosis, but it seemed like, for a couple of weeks afterwards, it's like it kind of opened a door in my mind and my subconscious. And I would go home from being in New York And then all of a sudden I'd be sitting at the kitchen table with my mom having a cup of coffee and a cigarette. And all of a sudden I'd remember something I hadn't thought of in 25 years. And I'd say, oh my God, I can't believe I forgot this. Hey, Mom, do you remember the time? And she'll be like, oh, yeah, I do. I can't believe that I forgot that either. So that was confirmation for me that this was kind of, shaking it loose, so to speak. And then yet it wasn't something that was implanted by my hypnotherapist, because my mother would confirm, yeah, that did happen. I remember that. And she wasn't even there when I was hypnotized. So it did kind of have this delayed reaction to me. And then one time when I went to New York, I had a bad tooth that hurt really bad. And they hypnotized me to block the pain of the tooth out till I could get back home from New York and go to the dentist. And it worked.
Wow.
So, there's some good things about it. I'd say it's, cool. If you feel like you need to or want to explore something with hypnosis, just find a good therapist that's qualified. Yep. And do whatever you feel like. But if you have experiences, you don't remember a lot of stuff still, and you're okay with that, then I would not, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Right.
If you're functioning normally in your life and it's not causing you, major issues, then I figure for my own self, when my mind is ready to remember, it'll come. And if I haven't remembered it yet, then I must not need to. So,
Yvonne, do you think that screen memories are blocked, or blocked memories are a function of the human mind to protect against trauma? Or do you think it's something that the ETs put into the minds of experiencers so that they won't remember, they won't talk, etc.?
Yeah, I think in these instances with abduction experiences, the beings are able to put whatever they feel will calm the person. People say, oh, I kept seeing a deer eyes, staring in my window, or an owl. There's so many instances of this. They will also use, and this is because this has been so difficult for people when the person is on the craft, and of course they're scared, they don't know what's going on, and all of a sudden they go, oh my God, there's my mother, there she is, and she's been gone, deceased for years. And then all of a sudden the mother morphs into one of the alien beings. And oh my God, one of my clients was just so angry, and I won't say this on the air, but she made an expression, and then I thought, boy, that's a perfect way to describe what was just done to her. The subconscious mind's job is to protect us. Whenever we've gone through any kind of trauma, whatever it is, it'll block all of it for a while, or partial, and then eventually the partial memories will start bubbling up. And this is what happens when a person is beginning to get ready to, remember more. They're ready. Like Deb said, if you really feel like you need to do this, and I send out, information saying, be sure that, you want to do this, because once you open up that box, that can of worms or Pandora's box, whatever you want to call it, we can't put the toothpaste back in the tube once it's out. So, I talk to people way before they go into this. It's, it's very serious, but the screen memory is just, this happens constantly. And then years later, people will go, wait a minute. Because one person I had said, I remember going through the bushes, and I was, they were supposed to be hunting. And he goes, I saw like 6 albino deer in a circle, and that just made perfect sense to him. Until years later, he's going, wait a minute, albino deer in a circle. And And then when we regressed, he said he didn't have, I think I asked him if he had his weapon, because, he was going to hunt. He goes, no. He goes, why would I not have a weapon? And he thought he was hunting all this time. So it's the phenomenon. I mean, it's just amazing to me what they could do to the mind and what the subconscious does as well.
Terry, I'd like to come back to you. You were a conscientious objector, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I wanted to be a medic, and for that reason.
And so you, through classes on the base, I understand that there was a satellite campus on the Air Force Base where you took classes.
Yes.
You became an EMT and then drove an ambulance. And can you please relate to our audience the time when you and Toby were called to the scene where there were lots of police and
Yes.
I think it was the Kilo 5.
The Kilo 5 incident. Yeah, that was in January of 1975. We were working one night. We got a call. There was a thing called a crash phone that only rang when there was something involved. It was a nuclear base. There were Minuteman II ICBM missile silos spread out all over the countryside. And if it was something to do with nuclear weapons or, airplane crash or something, the crash phone would ring. So a crash phone rang, and there was a missile technician servicing a Minuteman II ICBM missile in a silo. And he's in the middle of the night and slipped and fell and broke his ankle. Or somebody thought it wasn't actually broken, but and they asked us to come out and pick the guy up. And there were a couple of things about the call that were just different from the usual call that we would get. We used to get a call with they would give us as much information as they could about the status of the guy and all this. And this was just, get here now. And so whatever, So we, I always drove the ambulance, and Toby always navigated because I have no sense of direction. And we went there. We were about a mile away on this country road. And these things were always in remote areas. And we could see this pulsating orange cloud that was just weird on the horizon. And we're like, what the heck is this? And we came, there was a roadblock, and it was just bitterly cold. It was below zero. There was a security police car parked sideways. And we rolled up, and the guy was in his car. I think he was supposed to be standing outside, but I don't blame him. I rolled my window down. I'm like, hey, what's going on at Kilo 5? He says, boy, you got me, but there's a lot of people down there. I'm like, okay. So this pulsating orange cloud was all these security police cars and trucks had these overhead orange flashing lights. And these flashing lights were all on all these cars, and they were out of sync. So they were, because it was so cold, their exhaust fumes made this cloud that hung over the facility and had this orange glow to it. And it was just weird. And I'll get to the point. We rolled up on it, and there was a captain in the roadway. He said, pull the ambulance over there, have a seat, stay in your ambulance, stay off the radio. I'll let you know when you come in and get your guy. He's walking and talking. I'm like, okay. Not the standard way we do business, but, whatever. So the windows inside the ambulance start to frost over because it's so cold. And we're facing in the wrong direction. We can't see anything. And my friend Toby's like, hey, I'm going to go check this out. I'm like, no, man, we're ordered to stay inside He's like, I got to see what's going on. He was like that. he hopped out of the ambulance, and about 3 minutes later, he opened my door, grabbed me by the shoulder, and says, "Man, you have got to see this!" Expletive, expletive, expletive. And he's pulling me out of the ambulance, and I grab my parka, and I'm outside, and here Toby walks right up to this captain, and we're all standing there, and they're looking up, and I'm like, I guess I was slow to catch on. I tilt my head and I look up, and there was this thing about the size of a full-size van that was matte black, non-reflective, no windows, no doors, no screws, no
Seams.
no means of propulsion at all. And it's at a dead stop, and it's right over the top of this the missile tube where the 60-foot tall Minuteman II ICBM sets with the blast dome over the top. And this thing's like 50 feet in the air, but it is at absolute dead still. And your mind kind of grasps for, you're looking for wires or something. It's just hard to process. And this thing looked very much like the Rendlesham thing that was reported. And we watched it for a couple minutes, and it just shot off like 0 to 500 miles an hour and was gone. And the thought of that being extraterrestrial never crossed my mind. I mean, here I was, I'd seen flying saucers twice. This wasn't a saucer, ergo this was something else. So we thought it was some kind of prototype helicopter or something, or we thought it was maybe something the Russians sent over, but really didn't think about it in terms of being something extraterrestrial.
And can you tell us about being debriefed after that?
Yeah, we got back to the hospital, dropped our patient off at the ER, and I did the paperwork. We did paperwork for every run, and the hospital commander was there, and it was really early in the morning, at 4 or 5 a.m., and he went down, picked us up from the ER, follow me, boys, and we went down to his office, and actually he's a very nice guy, and he said, "Can I see your report?" I said, "Sure." I handed him my report. And he made a photocopy, and then he took a black magic marker and redacted some stuff. I think it was the times, time of arrival, time of, he redacted the times and went over and made a couple more copies and stuck them all in his desk drawer. And he's like, "Okay, boys, I know that you're smart guys. And, what you saw out there was a prototype helicopter. Okay. And it's a secret. So,
Which is obvious bullshit.
That's obvious. Of course. And he's like, "So don't tell a soul." And we couldn't wait to get home. Tell our wives, tell our friends. We told everybody, and everybody was, "Oh boy, that's cool. I wish I'd seen that." My friend had the presence of mind to draw a picture of it because he was kind of a math guy. And he counted the panels on the side of the thing and was able to draw from memory a pretty good picture of it. I wish I'd had that. Wish I'd kept that. Yeah, so that's what we saw. And the security police. There are a lot of security police out there that had really bizarre experiences, more so than what we had. But because of our job as an EMT, we got to know the security police guys pretty well, and they told us particularly about. An orange glowing ring that would appear over the bunker where they kept the nuclear weapons and shoot a laser beam down into it. And I heard that over 6 years. I heard that from multiple different people, who didn't know one another. And it's the kind of thing, you talk about in whispers. But I believe a lot of that happened. Probably still does.
Do you remember having any Men in Black visits, people telling you, not to talk about what you saw, that sort of thing?
No, not in the military. I didn't know.
So after you were in the military, did you?
I had some pretty strange encounters after I published Incident at Devil's Den on March 10th of 2018. And I had some kind of strange things happen. I spoke at a MUFON meeting in Houston, which is a 4-hour drive from Dallas. And on the way back, I had this white van follow us. And I'd slow down, it'd slow down, I'd speed up, it'd speed up. And I got off on the off ramp and it got off on the off ramp. And, this thing was following us. I mean, I don't know if I accidentally cut somebody off and they were angry or what. I mean, after all, I am in Texas. So, I don't know. But, and I had a weird incident the year we moved in here, 2019. There was this silver Lexus parked across the street with heavy tinted windows. And it would pull up and park and stay there, most of the day and then leave. And my wife's like, what's up with this car? I'm like, I don't know, because the house across the street was empty at the time. So it got annoying to me. And I told my wife, after a week of this, I'm going to go out and find out who this is and what they want. So I don't know who I'm dealing with. I put a pistol in my back pocket and I grab my phone and I go out and I tap on the window and it rolls down about that much. And I'm looking down, there's two guys in business suits in the car. And I'm like, you guys want to tell me why you're staking out my house? Window goes up, car drives away. But I got a picture of the license plate. So I still have friends in law enforcement. The plate was traced to Alamo Rental. It was traced to DFW, to a rental place. And I contacted the rental place and they said, yeah, that plate is ours, but it's on a Ford Focus. And they said, we don't rent cars that have tinting on the windows at all because it's a liability issue.
Yeah. Interesting. That's very common. It happens to a lot of people of seeing strange vehicles, and something very similar happened to me. But I wanted to, if it's okay, Gil, I wanted to ask Deb, because Terry talked about his symptoms and what he went through after his experience. Deb, what brought you? What were you experiencing? What symptoms did you have before you contacted Budd Hopkins?
Oh, I couldn't sleep at night. As soon as the sun went down, I was wide awake. I didn't care how exhausted I was. And I would sit up all night between my kids' bed like I was waiting for something, but I didn't know what. And I couldn't go into the bathroom upstairs. There was a window in that bathroom. And the window freaked me out because I kept feeling like something was going to pull me through the window and take me out. And for a long time, when I would go outside in an open area like you were talking about, I would duck and run, even if I was running under trees till I could get to my car, to my front porch, just because I felt vulnerable. And I can imagine how a rabbit in an open field would feel if there were hawks flying around. That's kind of how I felt, So I had a lot of anxiety. I went to the emergency room a couple times a week, in a week's time, because I thought I was having a heart attack, but it was a panic attack. And it was rough for a long time. It's, I'm still doing PTSD therapy, and I'm doing EMDR therapy, and I'm doing the alpha wave brain stuff. So
what is EMDR? Is that what you said?
Uh-huh.
What's that?
It's a therapy that they use now. It's supposed to reroute your wiring in your brain and take the traumatic stuff that's in the forefront of your brain and show you, or let your brain put it in a different place where you can deal with it and function better.
Is this kind of like a biofeedback thing?
A little bit. It's FDA approved, and my therapist is the only one certified within a 25-mile area, so my insurance actually pays for it, which is great. But they've used it for first responders and military people that have the PTSD. They found that it helps a lot, so now it's kind of gone into more mainstream. But it's been very helpful for me. And we've just been doing that in the last year. And she knows about my experience in '83 and some other stuff too. I don't know why. I just felt I could trust her for the first time, tell someone. And she's like, hey, that, let's do some EMDR therapy on that experience too. And it's been helpful. So, but yeah, I've had tremendous amount of anxiety, panic attack, and yeah, it was not fun.
And that's what I wanted to, bring across to your audience, is that if, many people do feel these symptoms, that's why they seek out help. Because they can no longer function. And so anyone out there, experiencing this, after you've had perhaps a sighting, like a couple sightings that Terry has had and so forth, there is help. And now that we have the internet, which we didn't have, like Deb said, when I first started, we didn't have any of the internet, nothing, email. I don't think I'm making that sound.
I don't think I am either.
We can find out.
I don't think.
My phone's not
Yvonne,
doing anything.
it is you.
Oh, shoot. You know what? I'm so sorry. My son left his phone at my house. Oh, my God. I didn't know that was his ringer. I'm thinking, uh-oh, doing something to it. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'll have to go give it to him when we're done. I'm so embarrassed. When you have kids.
I wanted to ask Terry, if you could tell us about the nosebleeds that you had, and if you think that there's a correlation between the nosebleeds and your experiences.
I can't say for certain, of course, and I've never had an implant or anything found in my nose. But I've talked to a couple people who contacted me because I asked, if you've had an experience and you want to talk about it. I'm not a therapist or a doctor, but I'd love to hear your story. And I had a couple of people contact me who had, unexpected nosebleeds. And then one lady in particular, she was at the sink brushing her teeth and she had blood running down her nose. She's like, oh my gosh. And she blew her nose into some toilet tissue, and there was a little tiny silver bead that came out of her nose. And without thinking, she dropped it in the toilet and flushed it.
Oh,
and the second she did that, she's like, why didn't I keep that?
I've heard that.
I've heard that before too.
Oh my God. They're programmed to do that. They're programmed to just throw it away.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
In the second hour, we generally take questions from the chat, and we have one here from Gap Stargate. And the question is, for any or all of you, when you see Hollywood movies like Fire in the Sky or Close Encounters, does it bring validation or anxiety, or do you just dismiss it as Hollywood? And any of you can answer, or all of you.
I don't watch them.
Go ahead. You don't watch them? I've seen them. My dad took us to see Close Encounters of the Third Kind on Christmas when it premiered, I think in 1977. And I remember I kept poking my dad in the theater. The whole family was there, but I poke him in the shoulder and said, look, when, the little guys came out for particularly, and he's like, stop. But I got excited when I saw them. It didn't provoke me to be anxious, but yet it
brought validation.
Well, I kept poking my dad, and I kept saying, yeah, look at that. That's what I'm talking about. That's real. That's real. And he's like, shut up. But yeah, so it was kind of like I was feeling like I was validated because I felt like that was real. That they really looked like that. I didn't know why. I couldn't tell him why. And then like there were some parts of fire in the sky that caused me to have a lot of anxiety. Particularly the scenes shot inside the craft, that bothered me. So there's a little bit of both, I guess.
Anybody else have an answer for Gap Stargate on that question?
And Terry said you said you don't watch them, right? You don't watch.
Generally not. Yeah.
I just remember when Close Encounters came out, but it was already on, when was it, HBO, or back then. My youngest son was born in 85, so it was after 1985. I think he was about 5 years old, and we were watching it on TV. And when that the mothership was hovering and that tall, spindly being came out at the end, I think it was at the end, Brent came over to me and sat real close on the couch, and he said, "Mom, that's what that spider looks like that comes into my room." I mean, talk about, I got chills. I'm getting chills now, because he would always say there was a spider that would stand in the corner of his room and talk to him. And those were the days when the nights when he would just come into our bedroom and sleep on the floor next to me, bring his blanket and his pillow, sleep on the floor next to me. And most of the time I wouldn't hear him, and I would just see him in the morning. And I've talked to, many, many parents, and they're gone through the same thing, or they're going through the same thing. So that triggered him at such a young age. And he was kind of cuddling with me. I think he wasn't sure if he should be scared or what, but that it just triggered that spider.
John Lopez in the chat says, "I've seen Close Encounters over 400 times, I think."
Hi, John. Nice to hear from you.
And I wanted to ask Terry, if you could go back and not have these experiences because of all of the nightmares, and you mentioned in the books that they hurt you, and I believe, please correct me if I'm wrong, that there's some dialogue during one of these abductions where they're annoyed with you and they're saying, "Why are you screaming?" Is that right?
We don't hurt you. We take you back. Now stop screaming. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I've been asked that question a lot, and I gotta honestly say that I wouldn't trade my experiences for the world. I mean, it's just a part of who I am, and I feel like some part of me would be missing if they somehow waved the magic wand and none of it ever happened. I don't know. I'm fine with it. I guess I'm finally fine with it.
And when you mentioned that they hurt you, and you mentioned in the books the mantis being, which obviously Dr. David Jacobs has characterized as sort of being at the top of the food chain, and then the tall gray, and then the shorter gray. What did they do to you to hurt you, and how long did that continue?
Well, I suffered a couple of injuries. Dr. Bug, or whatever you want to call him, the gray, the mantis thing, hurt me, but did something to my lower back. But like I said, there was a medical vibe to it. I didn't feel like he was hurting me intentionally. I felt like it was collateral damage. And then the other thing, that I suffered with was we both were burned. Like the worst sunburn I'd ever had in my life. I mean, everywhere on my body. and we both had what's called flash burns to our eyes. It's like what a welder would get if they didn't wear that hood with the smoked glass.
And when you say both, do you mean you and Toby?
Yes, both of us.
Yeah.
I mean, Toby had black skin, but he was hurt, and I think that whatever hurt me, he got a double measure because he was really hurting.
Wow. And Deb, this is something that happens pretty often. Do you recall having painful abduction experiences?
Yeah, I do. And after June 30th, 83, my eyes were a mess and were never right again. I ended up being diagnosed with macular degeneration and cataracts in my 30s. And
Wow.
My vision went very farsighted immediately afterwards. I had the next day after that night, my mom took me to the emergency room because I woke up with my eyes swollen completely shut. And the first thing the doctor asked me once he got me behind his little examining things was, had I looked into the arc of a welder's torch?
Oh.
Now I have one blue eye and one green eye, and they still turn red and water all the time. I finally had to have both my lenses completely replaced, so I have acrylic lenses implanted. They monitor my macular degeneration. It's stable now. I mean, it's not gotten any worse, and it's still dry, but it all came from that night. Mm-hmm. And who knows what other things it may have done to me. I had some other health issues, physical issues over the years. Although I must say, I feel as if it was not malicious and it wasn't an intentional thing. I feel like it was a side effect of what I had come in contact with that was not intended. So,
and we have another question for you from Gap Stargate. I apologize. The previous question was from Herc 130. Gap Stargate asks, question for Debra, what was it like when they did the miniseries Intruders? How did you relive the memories, and how do you cope today?
Well, it was wild, to be sure. I never thought anything like that would ever happen. Now, as it turns out, the miniseries, while it has the name Intruders, and there were a couple of scenes within the miniseries that came directly out of the book, there are most of it is like a compilation of multiple cases that were put together and included in it, and then some Hollywood license, because they can
composite the characters. Mm-hmm.
But the important scenes that came directly out of Intruders, I will say, Mayor Winningham, who played my character in the movie, she called me twice to ask me how she should play these particular scenes. She had respect for me and what I had been through, and wanted to make sure she did it right, which I appreciated a lot. And she did a good job. It was very difficult to watch those scenes. I watched the whole thing, and while a part of me was kind of disappointed that it wasn't more about Intruders, because that was the title, and I got a lot of questions afterwards that were hard to answer because they weren't my experiences. But overall, it was, I think, one of the first things that was ever done mainstream that was respectful and didn't have some kind of laugh track to it. And I feel it did a good thing, in the long run, because it opened people's eyes and minds and brought this to the forefront. But it was difficult to see the scenes that actually came out of Intruders. Today, I deal with it all by, writing, journaling, which turned into my book, connecting with other people like me. Thank God for Ciro. Even though I'm 2,000 miles away, I connect with them monthly on Zoom meetings for out-of-towners, which is priceless to me. And, I have my therapist that I talk to. I'm fortunate to have support of my family and friends. So, and I've learned how to grow from what I've been through, and now pay it forward and I want to reach out and help other people like me. So.
And I just wanted to interject when Deb was talking about Mayor Whittingham. Yeah, I thought she did an excellent job in the movie. She actually, and probably after she talked to you, Deb, because she wanted to make sure she did those scenes correctly, she called me and asked if she could sit in on an actual regression. So I asked one of my female clients if it would be all right for her to observe the session. And she came over, and it was an actual, actual case, actual session. And she sat there and took notes and studied, the reactions and so forth. So I thought she did a great job. In fact, when I saw the miniseries, I mean, I cried during those, because I sit there.
So did I.
With these people, and sometimes I just want to cry with them, but I have to hold back because I said, if I fall apart, who are they going to turn to? So, but it was very touching, some of those scenes, and then after knowing you, Deb, and we talked a lot during those days on the phone because we didn't have all this before. So, but I thought it was very well done. I agree with Deb. I thought it was very well done.
And I'd like to jump in here and ask Lawrence Martin's question for Terry. Has anyone tried video surveillance to document or catch recurrent abductions? I remember in your book you advised a client about this. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, I was pretty new. I was brand new to the UFO community in 2018 because I had been UFO and abduction avoidant. I didn't think about it. I didn't talk about it. So I was naive about a lot of things when I wrote when I put Devil's Den out in March of 2018, and I've since discovered that a whole lot of people have tried that, and nobody's been really successful. That the camera will malfunction, it'll just skip forward, or it'll have just static. But evidently, cameras aren't real effective. So.
And John Lopez has a question, and I'll put this out to all of you. It seems like the hybrid program has been going on for a very long time. Any thoughts as to why, especially since it seems like these entities are so advanced?
Well, just as I mentioned previously, my colleague and friend, Dr. David Jacobs, in his book, I think it's Walking Among Us, he is saying that he's projecting that these hybrids are here to replace us. Eventually, they're going to replace all of us.
They're insinuating themselves into our society.
I mean, and people feel that they have met hybrids here on Earth. So I do feel that they're here. But I hear all the rumors of, they're all throughout the government, and some of them are reptilians, and you have to just really be careful what you see and read on the internet. But I feel that they're coming down here. These babies, these hybrid babies, are growing up, obviously, and they're being perfected all the time, so that when they're here, I mean, we probably have passed by them. We probably saw them at some conferences. I know I had an experience with a little boy that I thought, he was very different. He was in my lecture in Roswell, and the way a 10-year-old boy, he asked the questions about the triangular body marks, and it wasn't a question that a 10-year-old would ask.
Make up.
No, and other members of the audience noticed him, and another, Ron Regier, who lectured upstairs in Roswell, later on he said, "Did you have that kid in your room?" I said, "Yeah, I did." So people noticed him. I mean, his hair was a little different, but it wasn't where if they were sending them down, like say back in the 80s, and they still had the bigger eyes and the sparse hair, obviously we would know that something's wrong. They're down here, and people would be alarmed. But now they're here. I don't feel, or maybe it's just my wishes or positive thoughts, that they're not here to replace us. I mean, I feel they still need us. They still need our DNA. They still need the sperm and the ova, and also our emotions, because they have told people, they've taken them up on the craft, this is your child or these are your children, and you need to show it love for it to survive. They're told that
Right.
all the time. So I feel they do need us.
I have another question for Terry. Your experience took place in a state park. Thousands of people go missing from state and federal parks each year. We only have to look at David Pilati's Missing 411 book series or his films to know about that. Do you have a theory of where these people go?
No, I don't. I mean, I think they go up. I think that, the way they kicked Toby and I off of the ship when they were done with us, I don't think everybody's as fortunate.
Right.
I don't know the selection process. I don't know, there's a theory that, we made a deal with ET that they could take X number of people with impunity. And then somehow they've exceeded their quota. They exceed their quota. Maybe a quid pro quo where we give them people or livestock and they give us technology. Who knows? But I don't know. But I think it's a piece of the puzzle. These people that go missing in state parks under really incredibly weird circumstances. I think that's
very. Yeah, I mean, I just watched David Pilati's one of his videos last night while I was barbecuing, and a couple of times I thought about your boots, Terry, that you said they were untied. A couple of missing, and they're hunters, so they're very, very, very experienced outdoors. Their boots were left like just very neatly side by side. There's been several cases of that, and my sister had a theory of they probably were taken in another dimension, maybe a parallel universe. But I agree with Terry. I think they're probably taken and unfortunately not brought back. I would hate for them. I would hate to think that the alien beings that we deal with, have done this. But then I see that we're talking about Close Encounters, the movie. At the end, all these missing people start coming out of the mothership. Mm-hmm. I was, that part of it blew my mind away, because I thought, oh my God, wouldn't that just be wonderful? Because I had a friend that disappeared when we had just graduated from high school, and we never found her, wow. And it was like, wouldn't that be just wonderful with all the children that have been missing and the cases that David Pilati investigates. So, who knows? We don't know. That's the thing. We can only.
And we have one quick question for Terry from Kevin Hill. And he says, Terry, in your book, you mention a memory of seeing something in a tank full of pink fluid. Do you have any further thoughts on what that was and what the purpose might be?
You know what? That's a flash of a memory, but it was very disturbing, and that's been something that's been a subject of a nightmare. And nice to hear from you, Kevin.
Yeah, hi, Kevin.
Yeah. I recall going down a hallway when they were taking me into the room with Dr. Bug, and there were a series of fish tanks to my right. I mean, I thought they were aquariums, but they were all variety of different sizes. And I really didn't see, I couldn't move my head, so I only had my peripheral vision to rely on. But I caught a glimpse of one of the tanks that was like a pretty good size what I call I don't know anything about aquariums, but I call it a doctor's office size aquarium, if that makes sense. And it had pink fluid in it, and there seemed to be there was what looked like a puppy. I thought it was a puppy. It had like folds of brown skin all over it, and I don't know what it was.
Maybe it was a Bacta tank.
Maybe.
I'm going to go ahead and bring in one of my moderators, Antiderivative Jill, and she's going to help us with our giveaway today. And we have 2 books that we're going to give away. One being Terry's Incident at Devil's Den, and the other being Yvonne's book, Chosen. So, hello, Jill. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing great. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Do we have everybody on the wheel for the giveaway?
Yes, everybody who's going to be on the wheel have entered.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and bring the wheel in. And let's give it a spin for Terry's book, Incident at Devil's Den, and then we'll go ahead and give away Yvonne's book, Chosen.
Wow.
Congratulations.
Congratulations to Gap Stargate.
Yes. And make sure to get in touch with me or one of the mods and get your mailing address information to me so that I can pass it on to the authors. And let's go ahead and give a spin for Chosen.
Wait a second. Oh, I actually think that I need to fix something on this.
Okay.
It should have been linked.
Okay.
And it wasn't linked. Just a moment. Okay, that's better. Do we want to spin again?
Sure. Let's go ahead and spin again.
Okay.
Boy, it makes me dizzy seeing my face in there. Peter Graves. Congratulations.
And since I didn't have everybody's name on there, can we do a respin?
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Okay, so a respin. Congratulations to Peter Graves. So respinning for the second book.
Woohoo, Jochen! Congratulations.
Yes,
That's
congratulations.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for helping us with that, Jill. I do appreciate it.
You're welcome. I'll see you guys next time.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome, guys.
And I just wanted to ask you guys, are there any closing thoughts? And with that, what is the photo that we are looking at here?
Oh, that's a silver disc over my house.
Oh, right.
if you enlarge it a little bit, you can see there's kind of the glint of the sun on the top, and it's black underneath. That actually followed me home. I saw it on the highway. It followed me home from my doctor's office about 10 miles away. And I got some pictures of it in motion, but it stopped directly over my house. And I took that photograph.
I think you sent me that picture, Terry.
I think I did.
I know you sent me some of the helicopters.
Yes.
That were.
You've had a black helicopter activity?
I have 168 pictures of helicopters from over my house. As a matter of fact, I sold my house and we moved because of that. And actually, Dr. Bruce Solheim, our good friend, was a former helicopter pilot in the Army, and he was able to help identify them. None of these helicopters had any kind of markings on them whatsoever. So.
Yep, I've seen them too. I've got pictures of them over our house as well.
I think just about everybody.
My share of bizarre helicopter activity, but they weren't helicopters.
Ah.
I'll tell you guys about that off air if you like. Any final thoughts, ideas that you'd like to pass on to the audience? Anybody?
Just real quick, as you know, Deb was talking about her experience with hypnosis. If you are considering doing regression, to be sure that the person that you're choosing is qualified, has gone through training, is certified. Because this is a very serious subject, and you just want to be sure that you're in good hands with this.
Deb, did you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I wanted to thank John for the comment. I saw that just a minute ago. Yeah. I appreciate it.
Thank you, John.
Yes, and also anybody out there who's had this experience and you don't, it's new to you. Don't be afraid to reach out and talk to somebody. There's people like Zero out there. There's groups out there. You can come to my website and write to me if you want, and I will talk to you, maybe be able to find you. But I just want everybody out there that has had these experiences to feel comfortable to report them. That's one of my hopes. And before I die, that the stigma around reporting this goes away. So.
Yes, here, Deb.
And I have a final question for all of you. With what's been going on with ATIP and Lou Elizondo and things like that, do you think that we're any closer to disclosure, or is it going to come from the ETs? What are your thoughts?
I think it's going to come from the abductees experiencers, of so many coming forward, just like Terry, just like Deb, many more from all walks of life. They're going to drive it, because then our government and whoever they are will not be able to turn away with masses of people coming forward and saying, I've had this experience all my life. I don't hold my breath with our government coming forward with anything, really.
And who'd believe it?
Yeah, right.
Of the population might believe it.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I have to say, Terry, while I was reading your book, that very thing occurred to me. And what Yvonne just said was sort of the answer, that there's going to be a point where we reach sort of a critical mass where everyone knows somebody that has been involved as an experiencer or has been one themselves, and it's just going to sort of be like the dam breaking loose,
Oh yeah. Yep. And that's how I envision it. And keep coming forward, everybody, because just like Deb said, it's like we're trying to break through the stigma of this. We're in 2022, for God's sake. We know there's things flying around. The Navy has admitted it and shown us the tapes. So we have to keep doing shows like this. Thank you so much for having us.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. And I will say, we can handle the truth.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Yes, we can.
So, as Herc 130 has said, a round of applause to the panel for an excellent show.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Got a lot of very happy folks in the chat that you guys have been here. I hope that you will all return. I would love to do an individual show with each of you. So if that's something that you're interested in doing, please let me know. And we're past 2 hours, so we're going to go ahead and close up. And I'd just like to thank you all again for being on Into the Fringe. And thanks to my great mods and everybody in the chat. This is something that's really interesting to lots of people. And I just can't thank you guys enough for being involved. And this is something that's not easy to talk about. And you all do it with great ease and grace. And I think that's outstanding.
Thank you.
Thanks again
Thank
for being
you.
here.
Good to see you,
And
Deb and Terry.
Good to see you
Nice to
too.
see everyone.
it's Cardinal Sin